I want to tell you a story about a city in Massachusetts called Munson. It's a small town. It's about 8,000 people, so you've probably never heard of it. It's pretty average for a northeastern town in America. But if you had heard of it, it would have been because of this. In 2011, it was leveled by an F3 tornado. Now, if you know anything about America, hearing about a tornado in Massachusetts is like hearing about a hurricane in Germany. It never happens. They weren't prepared for it. And so this is what happened to that city. It was demolished. Houses were broken. People lost their jobs. People lost their lives. And in a crisis like that, there was this one very special woman I've met. She stepped up. She did what I bet the people in this audience would do. She stepped up and said, how can I help? How can I solve this problem? So she started corralling all the volunteers that she could and started getting them together to start solving the problem. People were shipping in resources, volunteers were stepping up, and people were saying, give me help. And she was running all of this effort, thousands of people, thousands of resources from her iPhone. And it's funny, if you talk to her about it, she says the biggest problem she had was that she had too many resources and not the tools to manage them. So in fact, some of the resources were wasted, and some of the help that could have been given wasn't provided. So she did also what I bet a lot of you would do. She built an app for that. So she made a little app for the internet that says basically, tell me what your needs are, tell me what you have, and tell me what you're willing to do. It's called Recovers.org, and she built this with her and two of her friends over the course of a couple of months. Because she thought that even though her city wasn't prepared, any city should be, and that the problems that she was facing in her town would be common in other towns in a disaster zone. And she was right. This is what happened in Forney, Texas, 6 months after the app launched. Another F3 tornado leveling a town. But here's what was different. Forney was able to use that piece of technology to respond to the crisis on the ground. So they're able to stand up Forney Recovers and basically be able to take a list of everything people had, everything that people would be willing to do, and match that up with needs. Thousands and thousands of needs were submitted. And she's proud, and that company is proud to say that every single one was able to be met because of this piece of technology. And that's the power of technology in a crisis. That's the power of technology in a community, that when it's needed and when people need tools to respond to a situation, they have it. And so this is now their company. It's Recovers. But the story doesn't end in Forney or Monson. They decided that this shouldn't just be a one-off situation, that in fact, this idea that there should be community-powered response, that the citizens who want to help, that the citizens who want to give back should have the tools in any city that they're in, should be commonplace. So now they've done the hard work of going city to city in the United States and contracting with the city government to deploy their piece of technology, because you know what? The best time to be ready for an emergency is before it happens. And the reason I wanted to tell you this story is because we're talking about changing the game. And I bet to a lot of you the notion of building software and selling it to government sounds insane. But what I wanted to do was come before you and tell you that if you want to change the game, if you want to have an impact in your community, this is one way to do it, and it's really important, and it's really important right now. But before we get there, some background. So my name's Abhi NEMANI. I grew up in Southern Illinois. It's a small rural town, not unlike Forney or Monson. I was just joking backstage that the tallest building in my town was 2 stories tall, not exactly like Hong Kong. I was always into politics. I was always into government. But I was always the nerd in the room. I was always the guy who would stand up the website when they needed it. And eventually, technology became a passion of mine. So I made my way to San Francisco eventually and started working for Google. And about 3 years ago, I quit my job at Google to go work and help build a new nonprofit known as Code For America. And I got to tell you, my parents were happy about that. So what's Code For America? The notion of Code For America, I think, is actually a game-changing one. It's the notion that you can change the way government works through technology, that you can fundamentally reimagine the way cities work by leveraging technology to make them more open, efficient, and connected. When we started it, I got to tell you, everyone told us that we were crazy. And I thought we kind of were too. People thought government's too broken. It's too disconnected. It's too removed. But over the last few years, we've seen that things are changing, and that right now is a tremendous opportunity to make something happen. So specifically, what do we do at Code for America? Well, we started off with this basic notion that let's bring together the great developers and designers from technology and bring them into cities and see what happens. So we launched this program. It's a fellowship. We call it a Peace Corps for Geeks. Basically, it's a public service opportunity for technologists to give back and make cities work better. And we focus on cities. And being here in Hong Kong, I would do it here because I love cities. And cities are the place where we get the services that we need, make the connections with the communities that we love. And so we wanted to work with cities. And so the core notion of the project is that we'll get a team of developers and designers, 3 or 4 of them, send them to a city like Chicago or Philadelphia, and see what can you do if you have free range to just experiment. If you can look at the challenges within City Hall and say, hey, I've got a better way to do that. And that's what they've been able to do for the last couple of years. I don't really want to talk much about the fellowship, but I wanted to give you an example or two of what we're doing so you can get a sense of kind of how it's feasible that we're able to work with government. So this is a story from the city of Boston. So it snows a lot there, and in fact, the first year of our fellowship, they had the worst snowfall in their history. So they have these fire hydrants right throughout the city, and when it snows that much, they get covered. And one thing we ask our fellows to do is to go around the city and ask people, what are big problems that you have? So they were talking to the fire department and asked them, hey, what's a big challenge in your job? And they said this. They said, this is the problem, that when it snows, instead of being firemen and putting out fires and saving lives, we have to shovel out these hydrants. And so one of our fellows is like, you know what? We can do something about that. Why do you have to be the one to shovel that out? There's a person living in the house right in front of that hydrant. There's an apartment building. There's tons of people who can help out. So they built an application. It's called Adopt a Hydrant. It's really simple. This is a very lightweight application. But the reason I bring it up is because I think it's game-changing. This application says that instead of a government being responsible to do everything in the community, we as citizens can do something as well. We can step up. You can adopt a hydrant. And it's great. So like, you put your address in there, you'll get a list of the hydrants near you. You pick one to like jump up and down. You can give it a name. And so it becomes your hydrant, and it's your responsibility to take care of it. And I bring this up because I think this is a game-changing notion. It's the notion that citizenship comes with responsibilities, and that technology is giving us a way to be more active as citizens, a way for us to do more. But it's not all about the apps. When we're in the cities, the fellows do some other fun stuff too. So this is what looks like a utility box in Santa Cruz, California, right? If I had to ask you guys what this was, I doubt that many of you would know what this is. I don't know what it is when I first saw it. Turns out it's a bike shelter. So Santa Cruz is near the water, so it rains a lot and there's waves, and they wanted to put bikes inside these shelters so they don't get ruined. But of course, no one knew that, right? That looks like a utility box, right? And so our fellows were like, that's bad. That's not using the resource. So they just went there and drew a bike on the side of all the shelters. They just painted that on. And the reason I want to bring that up is it shows that cities can have more character. They can be more playful, and they can be more accessible to citizens if they're just willing to try something new. So that's our fellowship. What we say about the fellowship is it shows what's possible. Because you guys and whoever was thinking this, that it's going to be hard to work with government, you're right. It really is sometimes. But what we're learning is that if you can get inside City Hall, if you can start working with the government and just show something interesting, show them Adopt a Hydrant, show them that bike rack, they're able to see something new. They're willing to try something new. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And so we have a bunch of applications that we've built. You know, that was from the first year. We built 21 applications in 3 cities. The second year, 2012, 52 applications. So lots of projects. But our strategy, and this is what I want to impress on all of you, is that that's just the beginning. That's opening the door to innovation. That's the start. And there's a lot more that needs to be done. There's this quote I love. It's, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. So instead of building every single thing a government wants, get the government to believe in your vision, believe in this other way of doing things, and then they're going to long for the endless immensity of the sea. So this is our strategy. We're hoping that governments will see the software we're building with the fellowship and then crave it, demand it. And then if that's the case, you then have to have a set of startups, new vendors, new technology companies that are going to address those needs. And so that's why last year I was proud to build a Startup Accelerator for Code for America. So for those of you who don't know, an accelerator basically brings together the most exciting, promising startups, gets them resources, training, and a network to help those companies become more successful. And we were positioned well in this market because we had a network of cities that we were working with. So we wanted to help tee up those cities for new, interesting startups, to make it just a little bit easier. In our first year, we had a 4-week application window. 235 companies applied for the 7 slots. So it was very competitive, and I'm proud of the 7 companies we picked, and I'm going to tell you about one of them. So this is Aunt Bertha. Not my Aunt Bertha, but an Aunt Bertha. This is the aunt of one of the founders of one of our startups. So he's from Texas, and I've heard that this is a problem, it's an increasing problem here, is that as populations age, they require more social services. And providing those services is a challenge. And a similar challenge is making visible those services to citizens. So Aunt Bertha wants a social service. She wants to get her Medicare, right, or go get health care. How does she know where to go? Well, right now, she has this awful, complicated system of 20 different forms, 3 different websites that are terrible. And she's not able to find the services that are her right, that are made for her. So this entrepreneur, Aaron Gray, made an application called Aunt Bertha. And it's this simple. You just put in your zip code, and it tells you these are the programs available to you. And you know what? He made a smart play. He said that instead of going directly to the government first, I'm going to go to all those forums, all those websites, get all that data myself, and make this application so I don't have to worry about contracting with the government to get started. So he's got something like 15,000 users in his first year in Texas. But this is where it gets really interesting. He's decided to make it profitable by then selling back that information to the government. Right? Talk about changing the game, right? And so these are the examples of the kinds of things you can do if you're willing to get creative and willing to take on hard, messy challenges. So these are some of the other companies that we worked with. Captricity is a nice one. They take all of these paper forms that you have to fill out in government and digitizes all of them. I talked about Recover's Measured Voice as a social media tool for government. And Revelstone, I'll mention this one last. Revelstone takes performance management tools for government, so the way they operate, how you say, use this resource or that resource, and puts data on top of it so cities can make smarter decisions. And the cool thing is, because they go city to city to city, the cities start to compete for their ratings. So the cities want to become better than the other cities, and they're able to make that kind of challenge. They're able to gamify that. So that's our accelerator. And I wanted to tell you about these companies not just to showcase them, not just to show you what's possible, but as a call to action as well. Because we're really just at the beginning. We call these civic startups. And this is an emerging market. There's not very many players in it. Even though we had all those applications, very few of them were viable companies. So we need people like you, people like your friends, people who are passionate about making their communities better to step up. Because to build an industry, it's not just about having, and Francis can tell you more about this, it's not just about having companies. You've got to have a community of people willing to support those companies and help them get better. You've got to have customers, clients, who are willing to work with that technology and buy it. And then finally, you've got to have capital. You've got to have investment firms that are willing to put money into these companies to help them grow. And I'll tell you on that last point, that's only going to happen when there's a lot of companies getting into this market and that there's a lot of brave young people like yourselves willing to say, you know what, it may be hard to work with a city, it may be hard to work with a government, but I care and I'm going to do something about it. So this is what I ask of you. And the reason why is this quote from my friend Tim O'Reilly. He says, technology makes things easy, makes the easy things easy, and makes the hard things possible. And I would add one more line to that. I would say that when something's possible and it's important, we have the responsibility to take it on. And let me show you one last example of why. So this is a lady named Miss Rita. She's in the city of New Orleans. She's retired and now spends all of her day tackling this problem called urban blight. Blight, if you don't know, it's vacant houses. And so I don't know how much you know about New Orleans, but as you may know, they were hit by this Hurricane Katrina a couple of years ago. And so a lot of people left the city, and a lot of houses were damaged, which basically means that now the city that had a population of, I think, 1.2 million is down to 600,000 So there's all of these houses that are vacant. And that may seem like an opportunity for real estate, but in fact, it's a problem for crime and public safety, because these vacant houses become hotbeds for crime. And so the mayor, when he came into office, he said, you know what? I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to take down 100,000 vacant houses in my 4 terms. This is the mayor. But guess what? No one had the data to tell him which houses were vacant or not. Miss Rita didn't have it. Do you know what she did? She spent 2 hours a day going house by house to figure out what the status of those houses were. Her and her friends would do that, and she wasn't the only one. Think about that. Citizens spending hours a day to go map out their city because their government didn't have the data. And the mayor of a major US city didn't have that data either. He told his CIO, his chief information officer, when can I have an iPad app that just shows me the status of any house that I'm standing in front of? Seems simple enough, right? And the CIO said it's going to take me 3 years and cost about $30 million to do that. Well, our fellows went in there, and they built it in 6 weeks. This is Blight Status. They basically went into City Hall like a SWAT team, went and found all the data sets, and built this simple application because they were able to go in there and innovate. They were able to go in there and find all this data. It's a pretty simple application, but the point is, it puts the mayor and Miss Rita and other citizens on the same level. And I love this quote from the newspaper that covered the launch of this application. It says, the app proposes a new kind of more productive communication between the two groups that moves past angry and frustrated citizens on one end and a paralyzed city on the other. Think about that. It changes the way the community works. It changes the social dynamics in the city. In fact, that CIO, after he got the application, the way he described it, he said, it changed the conversation. Beforehand, citizens were really upset and thinking the city wasn't doing anything. And the government was frustrated because it wasn't able to respond to their challenges. So what happens in that dynamic? Society corrodes. It's not productive and healthy and collaborative. But the technology that came into play, that application, Blight Status, was able to change the conversation and change the game. So in closing, I just wanted to say that when you build civic tools, you can build civic trust. And that's what they did with Blight Status. That's what they're doing with Recovers, with Aunt Bertha. And that's what I hope that all of you consider doing. Because you can sit around and complain about how the city works, you can complain about how your government works, or you can commit to being a change maker. You can commit to making a difference, and you can get involved. Thank you.